All right, welcome everybody to the deep dive. You guys are here listening because you're driven, whether that's, pushing boundaries in business, trying to elevate others through coaching, or striving to achieve peak athletic performance.
And today we are diving into a distinction that can really, either fuel your climb up the ladder or it can lead to some serious frustrating stalls along the way. And that's the difference between, the pursuit of perfection and the sustainable power of what we call an optimalist mindset.
And this is something that, a lot of high achievers, they find themselves, they're running on this treadmill, they're working harder and harder, but feeling more and more, just depleted. They're wondering why their efforts aren't leading to the type of success they envision.
Yeah.
Our source material today is from Coach Ed Padalecki, and he draws upon some really insightful things from Tal Ben-Shahar, and really emphasizes that this relentless, this pursuit of this flawless outcome in everything that you do, it can actually lead to burnout. So today we're going to explore why that is, and more importantly, we're going to introduce you guys to the principles of an optimalist approach, a mindset that's designed for sustained achievement.
Right.
And specifically, we're going to be focusing on three things.
Okay.
One, why perfectionism is actually holding you back.
Right.
Two, how embracing reality can actually fuel your ambition.
Awesome.
And three, we're going to give you some practical tools to cultivate this optimalist way of being.
Love it. I love it. And, this isn't just theory. I mean, Coach Padalecki, he's all about practical application. Our mission here is to give you a clear understanding of how to balance that intensity that you bring to the table with realistic expectations and with self-compassion.
Right.
And I think that's the key. It's like recognizing that true excellence, is a marathon. It's not a sprint to some perfect finish line.
Love it. Okay, so let's dive into this trap, the trap of perfectionism.
Yeah.
Coach Padalecki, he echoes Tal Ben-Shahar, and he speaks really powerfully about unhealthy perfectionism. Yeah. So what are some of the defining characteristics that we need to look out for, within ourselves to see if we're actually in this trap?
Yeah. So, at its core, unhealthy perfectionism, it's really just an unwillingness to accept reality.
Right.
It truly is what it is. And, the perfectionists, they kind of operate under this illusion that they can and should do everything flawlessly simultaneously. And they kind of ignore the fact that there are limitations, whether that's, time, your energy levels, or even the unpredictable nature of life itself. It's an all or nothing mentality. Anything short of flawless is it's deemed a failure.
Right.
And so the core insight here is that this constant, internal conflict between, your ideal and your reality, that gap, it's not a driver of excellence. It's a drain on it.
Yeah, it's like trying to maintain a sprint pace for, a marathon. It's just unsustainable. So what are the inevitable consequences of constantly striving for this unattainable ideal? What happens, in the long run?
Well, I mean, when you set yourself up against reality, when you set yourself up against the reality of human limitations, I mean, the only consistent outcome is that you fall short of your own impossible standards.
Right.
And so this constant disappointment, it fuels chronic stress, it fuels anxiety, and even, as we see in the source material here, it can actually contribute to depression. It becomes a cycle, a destructive cycle, where the harder you strive, the more pressure you create, the more you increase the likelihood of falling short, which then just reinforces those negative feelings.
So it's like you just said, it's just this it's just not sustainable in the long run.
No, it's not.
So let's talk about the optimalist, right? It seems like the antidote to this.
Right.
What fundamentally distinguishes an optimalist from this perfectionist mindset?
Well, the optimalists, they begin with a grounded acceptance of reality. Okay. They acknowledge their limitations, they understand limitations are inherent, and they learn to work effectively within those boundaries. Now, this is not about lowering your standards, Yeah. In fact, optimalists, they often hold themselves to very high levels of excellence, but the difference is that they're able to balance those high standards with self-compassion and with realistic expectations.
Okay.
They understand that setbacks are just inevitable. They're part of any journey, not a sign of failure. And so, by embracing imperfections and by seeing setbacks as learning opportunities, they actually cultivate resilience,
right,
which is the key to sustained achievement.
So it's not about settling for less.
Mm-hmm.
It's about a more, pragmatic and effective pursuit of excellence.
Exactly. The optimalist, they recognize that, building something truly significant, what Coach Padalecki calls this masterpiece life,
Yeah.
it's not achieved through one perfect monumental effort. It's the accumulation of all the small things.
Right.
We could call them base hits as opposed to, solely focusing on hitting a home run, right?
Yeah.
It's the steady, the consistent, the continuous refinement, rather than this frantic pursuit of an unattainable ideal.
That resonates a lot because I think so many high achievers, they fall into the trap of feeling like every single project, every single day, has to be this groundbreaking success, this huge win.
Right.
But it seems like the optimalists, they actually see the value in those smaller, consistent wins.
Absolutely. And this difference in mindset, it becomes really clear when we start to consider the concept of balance. Especially work-life balance. The perfectionist, they're chasing this elusive state of perfect equilibrium where every aspect of their life, their career, their family, their health, their personal pursuits, they want it all operating at peak performance all the time.
Which, let's be honest, it's a fantasy.
It is. It is. Life just doesn't work that way.
No.
And so this striving for this perfect balance, it just leads to frustration, and a feeling of inadequacy. The optimalists, on the other hand, they understand, what Coach Padalecki calls life's pendulum. They recognize that different areas of life are going to, command more of their attention and energy at different times. There'll be periods where their professional demands take precedence and other times where family or their personal well-being needs to be the priority.
So it's a longer-term perspective on balance, understanding that equilibrium is achieved over time through adjustments rather than, expecting this perfect harmony, every second of the day.
Exactly.
It's about taking a step back and seeing the bigger picture.
Right. The optimalists, they trust that balance is going to emerge over time through this series of choices and adjustments, rather than expecting it to be perfect every day. And so that acceptance of life's, natural fluctuations, it's a key differentiator.
Yeah.
And it really reduces stress.
So we've outlined, these limitations of perfectionism. We've talked about some of the advantages of this optimalist approach. Let's get into the practical application.
Okay.
So Coach Padalecki provides 8 traits. 8 specific traits that embody this optimalist mindset. So the first one is, there's no such thing as perfect humans.
Oh, yeah. That's a good one.
Why is that so important?
Well, it seems self-evident, but it's a foundational truth that perfectionists, they really struggle with.
Right.
The optimalists, they understand that mistakes are inevitable.
Right.
They're vital for learning and for growth. And so the focus shifts from, trying to avoid errors to actually viewing them as valuable feedback. Progress becomes the metric of success, not perfection.
Progress, not perfection.
Right.
Love it. Okay, number 2, establishing your guiding star. Determine your values. Why are clearly defined values so important for an optimalist?
Well, because when you have a clear understanding of your core values, they act as your internal compass,
Right.
They guide your decisions, they ensure that your actions are aligned with your purpose. And this provides a framework, for making choices that really feel meaningful to you, even when they're not executed flawlessly. Coach Padalecki, he shares his own LIFE values: love, integrity, faith, and excellence.
Right.
And having that clarity, it reduces the pressure to try and be everything to everyone. It allows you to focus on what truly resonates with you.
Love it. And it's like an anchor for you when things are chaotic.
Right.
Okay, number 3, and this is a very practical one. Keep a well, better, how journal.
Yeah.
This sounds really powerful.
Yeah. Coach Padalecki calls this your peak performance Bible, your personal one. And the process is simple. At the end of the day, you just take a few moments to reflect on 3 things: what went well, what could have been better, and how you can approach things differently tomorrow.
For how to improve. And so it intentionally shifts your focus away from dwelling on, perceived imperfections and toward actively seeking solutions.
Yeah.
It's a daily practice in continuous learning and adaptation.
Yeah. So it's not just about, writing down successes or failures, but about how you're going to actually grow from those experiences.
Exactly.
So number 4 builds on that. Get 1% better each day. This is a concept, that we hear a lot about, right?
Me too.
Incremental progress. But why is it so powerful?
Well, because it's powerful in its simplicity, really.
Yeah.
Coach Padalecki, he breaks it down, quantifies it. He says 1% of your day is about 14 minutes and 24 seconds.
Okay.
And so the idea is that you dedicate that small amount of time each day to improving in a specific area. It's about harnessing the compounding effect of these small, consistent efforts. You don't have to make massive leaps every day. Small, steady progress builds momentum, and it leads to, sustainable long-term results. Right. So you're not trying to, climb Mount Everest every day. You're taking, one step at a time.
That's right.
And that can feel a lot less, daunting than this all or nothing approach.
Yeah.
Okay, number 5, 3D your week daily, define, divide, and also using the acronym WIN, what's important now.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about, how an optimalist can use this to stay focused.
Well, this is about bringing intentionality to your time management.
Right.
So the daily, that reminds you to focus on what's important for that day. Define involves outlining those key tasks that'll move you towards your goals. And then divide is about allocating specific blocks of time in your schedule to actually work on those defined tasks. And the acronym WIM, what's important now, that serves as this guiding question you ask yourself throughout the process. It helps you to cut through all the noise, all the distractions, and it allows you to stay focused on what's going to actually make the biggest impact.
So it's like, you're not, doing a million things at once.
Right.
And you're not trying to make everything perfect. You're just focusing on what really matters.
That's right.
Number 6, create tiny wins, base hits versus home runs.
This is something we touched on earlier, but this seems to be a really core principle of this optimalist mindset.
Yeah, it is. It's this direct counter, to the perfectionist tendency to feel that every effort has to be, this massive breakthrough.
Right.
The optimalists, they understand that consistent small wins, those base hits, they build momentum, they build confidence, and they lead to greater overall success without that, inherent risk of burnout that comes with constantly chasing the huge achievements. It's about acknowledging the small victories and recognizing their power.
Love it. Okay, number 7, allow flexibility between perfection and good enough. So this one seems tough, right? This one seems tough for someone who's always strived for perfection, right? This is about developing discernment, The optimalists, they aim for excellence, but they also have the wisdom to know when good enough is good enough, Not every task demands, 100% of your effort and your energy. Learning to decide when to push for those exceptional results and when to accept something a little less perfect, that's crucial for preventing overwhelm, for preserving your resources.
So it's about being strategic.
Yeah.
Right? It's about knowing when to push for that extra mile and when to kind of conserve your energy.
That's right.
For something else. And finally, number 8, prioritize recovery stillness is the key. This seems like it's the first thing that goes out the window when people are really high achievers, but it seems like it's so important for the optimalist.
Oh, yeah. It's essential. The optimalists, they understand that sustained peak performance, it's not just about constant output, it's also about intentional input.
Yeah.
And that comes in the form of recovery. And Coach Padalecki outlines, 3 levels of recovery that are crucial. Micro recovery, those short 15-minute breaks that you take throughout the day just to reset. Then there's mid-level recovery, making sure you get 7 to 9 hours of quality sleep and you're taking a full day off each week to recharge. And then there's macro recovery, intentionally planning those longer breaks, 2 to 4 weeks annually. He even says that he takes a full week off every quarter.
Wow.
And recovery, it's not a luxury. It's a non-negotiable. It allows for physical and mental restoration. You can't pour from an empty cup.
So it's not the opposite of progress. It's part of it.
Right.
This has been great. So to summarize, it seems like the core message is that true peak performance comes from this consistent, intentional progress.
Yeah.
Not this illusion of unattainable perfection.
Exactly. It's about embracing reality, working within your constraints, balancing ambition with self-compassion, and having a realistic view of the journey, the optimalist mindset. It's not about lowering your sights.
Right.
It's about achieving more in the long run. It's about having a healthier and a more sustainable, a more effective approach to your work and your life.
So for you, the listener, take a moment. Think about, your pursuits, whether that's in business or you're a coach, or you're an athlete. Are you operating from a place of perfectionism? Or are you more of an optimist?
Right. And I think the more important question is what tangible step can you take today? Coach Padalecki, he challenges us to choose just one of these 8 optimalist traits and put it into practice.
Yeah.
Maybe it's scheduling in that 15-minute micro break that you're always skipping. Or maybe it's dedicating 14 minutes to planning your 1% improvement for tomorrow.
Yeah.
Or, just spending a couple minutes writing in your better how journal at the end of the day.
Maybe it's, identifying one of your core values
Yeah.
and using that to guide you in a decision that you have to make.
Right.
Or maybe it's, just deciding that good enough is good enough for that task that, doesn't require you to be at 100%.
Right. Just pick one and just watch how it changes your perspective just for today.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So ultimately, guys, what we really want to encourage you to do is to shift your focus away from striving for those perfect outcomes, the ones that are always so elusive and lead to burnout, and instead to start embracing optimal progress. Start celebrating those consistent small wins and accept the reality that, there are going to be successes and there are going to be setbacks.
Yep.
That's part of the journey. And when you do that, when you make that mental shift, you're going to be able to, completely reshape your approach to your work, your life, and you're going to see much more, sustainable and fulfilling achievement in the long run.
Yeah, that's right.
All right, guys. Well, that wraps up another episode of The Deep Dive. We will see you guys on the next one.
See you later.